lost in a world of legal war. You don't know which way to go. There's a hero waiting with expertise to lend. The Utah employment lawyer, HR.
Welcome back to HR's Best Friend, our podcast for HR professionals and business leaders who want to make sure they stay compliant, don't get in trouble, and keep their employees happy. D. Scott Crook is the Utah employment lawyer. He's consistently listed in Rocky Mountain Super Lawyers and Best Lawyers in America. He is the managing partner of Crook Legal Group. Scott is only licensed to practice law in Utah and Idaho. He's not giving specific legal advice. This shouldn't be construed as legal advice for your problem. If you need specific legal advice, please go to an attorney, preferably Scott. So we are back. We're getting more into regular cadence. Today in our show, we're going to go over a funny, I guess it depends how you define funny, but a funny Facebook picture I saw on Facebook regarding donuts, Chick-fil-A, and Pride Month. And then we have some anonymous questions about nipple piercings and about the boss acting like a jerk, which is nothing new. And then we discuss the episode where Michael spanks his nephew in the office. So here we go. Thanks for tuning in. All right, welcome back to HR's Best Friend. We are getting back to our regular cadence. This is great. Hello, Dad.
Hello, James.
Today, we are going to go through a few things. I found a funny picture on Facebook. We asked some anonymous questions. And then we're going to talk about the Office episode, nepotism, because that seems like a good HR-y thing to discuss. So let's dive into this. So I'm going to, I guess if you're on YouTube watching this, I will share this picture here. Can you see that?
I can.
Okay. So this is a picture of a box of donuts that says, and so there's a box of open donuts and there's a note taped to it. And the note says, "These sweet treats are for everyone except Camille and her Chick-fil-A eating self. Love, Kenyatta. Happy Pride Month." So the question is, what are the impacts of that sitting in the office? Walk us through all of the potential issues on every side.
Well, before I even talk about the legal implications, because there are some, let me just say that that's that's clearly a bad work environment. If that's kind of stuff is going on, someone's being essentially bullied because they don't share the same beliefs as somebody else. But anyway, beyond that, are there some legal implications to it? There are potentially legal implications, not necessarily. And I'll just kind of break it down. So generally, as I've said before, probably 100 times as we've talked, you're not entitled to a jerk-free environment, right? So someone could go and buy a bunch of donuts and say, "I'm sharing these with everybody but James because I don't like James." And
that's happened to me a lot more than you would think.
And yeah, at our office even. But
and it's been you.
Yeah. But if so from a legal perspective, if that were it, if it was just like, these are for everybody who I like except, and that means everybody but James, that wouldn't violate any legal, that wouldn't be illegal. This has a certain edge to it though, and it's clearly related to somebody's belief about sexual orientation, because of course the Chick-fil-A thing, because the Chick-fil-A has been is owned by a Christian family, and they have taken a certain position on homosexuality and sexual identity and gender, sexual orientation, and that sort of thing, that, of course, the person here is making a point. This is Pride Month, and since you like Chick-fil-A, you can get Chick-fil-A. You don't get a donut. Now, if the if the person who put the donuts out for everybody was a supervisor, then the supervisor, then that's a big problem, because that would be targeting of an employee because of sexual orientation, even if it's because they have a certain belief about sexual orientation that may not be the protected classification, if you will. If it's not a supervisor, it could also be a problem if the workplace is hostile to somebody because of their sexual orientation. In Utah, it could be particularly troublesome because Utah has a special statutory provision that is supposed to protect employees for their genuinely held religious or moral beliefs. And so there is a potential there that there could be some legal liability if it was bad enough, and in context with other things, it created a hostile work environment for another employee. So, from a legal perspective, we'd probably get rid of the donuts, just so we, or take the sign off of the donuts, or I would probably take care of that problem. Even if it didn't have that overtone, I'd probably still take care of that problem if I were the HR person, saying this is not what we want to encourage in at our workplace.
Okay. Very good. All right. Let's move on to our anonymous question. So, 2 of them. The first one says, I am posting anonymously as there are group members that I work with and who know my colleagues. I would greatly appreciate any constructive input on this situation. If you have resources or materials you are able to reference, could you please attach them? So here's the question. There is a man that I work with that has his nipples pierced, and you can see the barbells through his work shirts. This is an individual in a professional field of work, presents to the board of directors, and holds a higher level position as a manager in an office environment. What would you say or do? Would one way to deal with this, like you accidentally have them ripped off? Like,
yeah, that's
you try to bump him into doors so that they get ripped off. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
What a mistake.
Well, if you remember from the last time we talked, with the supervisor holding a bat, that's probably not a good idea.
But it was an accident.
Yeah. Sounds like it was. So this gets to the question of the underlying question here is can an employer have like a dress code that included something like that? And the answer is yes. An employer could have a dress code that says you can't have nipple piercings that are visible through your shirts, and you would be fine. Now, dress codes are particularly hot topic now and can create all kinds of potential liability, because if they're worded in a particular way that focuses on sex stereotypes, like, women should be wearing skirts or dresses, those would probably be a violation, almost certainly would be a violation of Title VII, because they're treating people like, if it's identifying women as having to wear those but not men. And so something like that, where you have like somebody having their nipples pierced, if it's visible, it should be sex neutral. It should be applied evenly with everybody, and you should just make sure that that everything is handled delicately, I guess you would say.
So if it's not in their, dress code now and they put it in there after this, that's not a problem, is it?
No.
Okay.
And in fact, you don't have to really have a written dress code. You could probably just, you could have an ad hoc dress code. That's never a good idea. I'm not saying that's from a legal perspective, you don't have to have a dress code.
Right.
It's probably better to have one if you're going to enforce things for various reasons. One includes for discrimination purposes, that you're not just adhering to one set of requirements for women and men, and if it's written down, it's easier to show that you're not doing that. But yeah, there's nothing that that would require you know, there's no like ex post facto prohibition, violation of anything.
Well, in the office, when Michael gets all of the, like, when he finds all of like Toby's folder of complaints that everyone has against each other, and Michael decides to like resolve all of them, and you know, Angela has complained about sexual harassment against Kevin, and Michael's solution was that Angela should have to sexually harass Kevin. Couldn't the solution here be that everyone has to get their nipples pierced?
Yeah, that probably would not be okay.
All right.
Okay.
Next question.
Michael was a genius, though.
Okay, so number 2. Looking for advice on a possible hostile work environment. We have a director who has received 2 recent complaints from different departments, but work directly with the director. The complaints are similar in that both feel bullied, talked down to, and disrespected. Both are afraid of retaliation. This is a longtime director who has never been accountable for their actions and has a loyal employee base. Director also has an ability to deflect anything negative and has an excuse. We are under new management. I'm hopeful we can take corrective action. An investigation will be started. How do I address retaliation concerns with those who submitted their complaints? Most importantly, how do I ensure this director doesn't retaliate? Do you have any recommendations on any must-do action items?
All right. So again, we're going back to the difference between what's legal and what's illegal. A director doesn't have to be nice to anybody. There is no legal requirement that a director be nice to anybody or to talk non-patronizingly to anyone. The only time that would be a problem is if he or she were treating somebody differently because of their race or religion or some kind of protected classifications. And even then, that would be a hard case to prove that that's the reason why. Generally, people who talk down to other people talk down to everybody, and that's not really there's not a legal violation there, which would also mean it didn't matter. I mean, legally, he could retaliate against somebody for complaining about him talking down. Now, is that a good practice? No. And should you protect employees from retaliation for having legitimate complaints? Yes. Is there any real way that you can prevent that from happening? Well, some of that is recommendations that are made for any type of investigation. And that is, you try to keep things as confidential as possible, as long as possible as you can. You try to be discreet about things, and you only involve people in the investigation as necessary, so it doesn't become a huge deal, so there's less likelihood of retaliation. The other thing to do is to go to other members of the board, explain the problem, and say they're concerned about, retaliation by this particular board member, and then have them internally take care of that before the investigation ever starts. But again, that's a matter of internal governance, and it's not necessarily a violation of any statute or other regulatory requirement.
Okay. Very good. Okay, now last thing, speaking of The Office, just wanted to go over an episode called Nepotism. So I'll just describe some things that happen in this episode, and you can weigh in on them using your employment lawyerly experience. So in this episode, there's a new assistant named Luke, So some things that Luke does. He arrives late with the employee's coffee. He accidentally mixes up Daryl's order. Daryl talks about how he doesn't like Luke in an interview with the camera crew. In the break room, Oscar and Phyllis complain that they gave Luke packages to deliver, but none of them arrived. But Michael, for some reason, is defending Luke, even though everyone does not like him. So as everyone in the office becomes increasingly annoyed with Luke, Michael continues to defend him. In a talking head, Michael reveals that he hired his nephew, who is Luke. So Michael tries to justify hiring Luke by explaining that he had that ulterior motive. So he tells everybody that Luke is his nephew, and he wants them all to treat Luke nice, even though he doesn't deserve it. The reason that he hired Luke apparently is because when Luke was a kid, he lost him in the forest. So he's trying to make his half-sister like him again. So anyway, so just speaking about like nepotism, like is there any what's bad, like is there anything bad about Michael telling everybody that he hired Luke specifically because he's his nephew, and that he wants everyone to treat Luke well and be nice to him just because he's his nephew?
So the answer is my son who works for me.
Yeah.
Nepotism is not illegal for private employers.
Okay.
It's not always a great idea.
Not always.
But it's certainly not something that's prohibited by the law, except for public employers. There are usually very strict anti-nepotism rules.
Well, in the show, Dunder Mifflin was traded on the stock exchange.
Yeah, that's not a public employer.
Oh, I see what you mean. You mean, okay, never mind, sorry.
I mean like a local government entity or a state governmental entity.
Okay, you're not talking about a publicly traded company. Sorry.
No. That's okay. People make that mistake all the time. I wouldn't expect it from you, but it's all right. So a public employer, meaning a local government entity, a state, federal government entity, they have strict anti-nepotism provisions, and it would be a problem. Like in Utah, for instance, in some communities, in most communities, some communities they're small enough. There's exceptions, but it's not illegal to hire somebody who's related. It's illegal for the person who is hired. I mean, for the person who is doing. It's a better way to put this is it is illegal for a relative to be involved in the decision making to bring the person on board, and then also for them to be a direct supervisor of that person. Now there are exceptions, like I said, for smaller communities and in certain circumstances, if, for instance, people were hired separately and then ended up one supervising the other, it can be okay. But anyway, there are strict prohibitions against it for public entity employers in Utah and a lot of federal agencies as well.
Okay. So now moving on to kind of what happens. So when Luke continues to irritate the office, Michael gets fed up and repeatedly spanks him in front of the entire office. Luke runs away crying and quits his job, with the rest of the office satisfied that Luke will no longer be a problem to them. So, what do you do as an employment attorney here?
I do have to say, this has never happened in my career. A lot of other things have happened.
In the show, he spanks him. Because in the show, he spanks him and says, "You will learn to be more professional." Right. So.
Yeah. I would say that if you had a supervisor striking another employee, whether they were related or not, you should probably let that supervisor go. because you would open yourself up to some future liability. Of course, if he was a real brat, maybe it'd be okay. Just kidding. The you should not, tolerate any kind of physical violence against anyone, even if there's a relationship there.
Okay, so
it could create liability in the future if not, like, for instance, if Michael in this instance also came into work, about 2 weeks later with a gun and shot people up. There could be some liability saying, well, you knew he had an anger problem and yet you didn't protect your employees.
okay, well, in the show, what happens is in the final scene, Gabe, who's like the corporate, it's kind of confusing what his job is exactly, but he's from corporate, and he tells Michael that because he spanked Luke, which was physical assault of an employee, he must either have a counseling session or be fired immediately. And Michael happily agrees for the counseling session, but after he finds out it will be Toby, he seriously considers just being fired. But the question, so is that do they do enough there to protect themselves from future liability?
So the answer is maybe. I mean, in this situation, which is unlikely to happen. I'm sure, though, that somebody has had to deal with something like this before. But in this situation where it's a relative and, there's no... and it was, come on, spanking somebody, which is, stupid. But if it were that kind of a thing, would you think this... and they had no other history of ever having any violent outbursts. Of course, Michael did run over somebody in his car once.
Accidentally.
Accidentally. But, if there's no other history of violence, then it may be okay. But it would... there's a lot that's contextual.
Okay, last little bit from this episode as an aside. So in this episode, this is also the episode where Pam ruins a prank that Jim was pulling on Dwight, because in this season, Dwight has bought the building that Dunder Mifflin works in. So Dwight is an employee of Dunder Mifflin, but he owns the building where Dunder Mifflin leases this office. The prank, Jim keeps trying to add useless keys to Dwight's keychain without him noticing, and Pam laughs, so Dwight sees it and he takes the keys off. So to try to make up for it, she has Kevin rewire the elevator so that the buttons do a bunch of different stuff. And so I just thought it's an interesting question that Dwight is an employee of Dunder Mifflin but owns the building, and Pam, another employee, vandalizes the building property. So I'm just really quickly, if you have any insights on what you would do to protect yourself in that situation.
Well, if you're an employer and any employee vandalized any building that you were in, what would you do? Well, you would probably discipline the employer, probably fire them. And it wouldn't matter whether the person who owned the building or not was also an employee. So I think you just take that position. If you have an employee who seriously rewired elevator buttons, that's kind of a safety problem. So I would probably take action against that person.
Okay.
I would recommend strongly taking action against both Pam and Kevin for doing that.
So, what does take action against? Just discipline, or you're firing Kevin?
I would probably fire them both.
Oh, wow.
I would recommend firing them both. Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Despite Pam supposedly being so nice.
Okay. Well, thank you. Well, that is all of our time for today. Thank you for listening and watching, and we will be back soon.
Thanks.
When you're lost in a world of legal war, and you don't know which way to go, there's a hero waiting with expertise to lend. The Utah employment lawyer, HR's best friend. Oh yeah, he's the advocate of the office, the guardian of rights, fighting for justice in the darkest of nights. When you're caught in the HR maze, feeling all alone, he's the ally you need to make your troubles be gone. Oh, the Utah employment lawyer, HR's best friend.